Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Nurtured by Nature podcast. I'm your host, Fiona MacKay, and normally our format is that I'm joined by a guest. But today I'm here on my own, as I'd like to take the opportunity to thank every one of you for being part of this journey. Today we're reaching quite a big milestone, which is episode 50, and I thought it'd be a great opportunity to reflect on the journey so far and to just say a heartfelt thank you to every single one of you. So whether you've been here since the start, jumped in partway through, or this is even the first time you've been listening, thank you for being part of this journey and community. Because one of the biggest things that I've learned from these 50 episodes is it takes community, it takes all of us. We need to all use our strengths, our individual passions, the areas of expertise, the things that we enjoy, and come together in this beautiful interwoven web of life to create a vision for a future for all of us. I thought of a theme for this episode, and it was really maintaining hope, because that's really the central facet of this podcast, is finding ways for all of us who care about the environment to maintain hope. I think hope is sometimes an underrated emotion, but I think it's a central facet for all of us to find a way through to a future that we would be proud to leave behind. Now, hope sometimes people think is passive, but actually earlier this year I had a fantastic conversation with Elizabeth Glen Copeland, and we did an amazing episode together which was called Daring to Hope, and is about her poetry book Daring to Hope. And in that we discussed the idea of active hope, which is something that's been around for a while, and it requires us to take action, to not be passive observers. And then moving on from that, I've explored more recently this idea of sacred activism with Cynthia and her book Summoned by the Earth. I think the two go hand in hand, and they really provide us with a way to move forward in this current time that we're experiencing. Sacred activism is really at its core finding that place of love within us, remembering what we love and acting from that place. Yes, I, like all of you, have my times when I feel this raging frustration, anger, even hate for people who just disregard and exploit the environment. I mean, earlier this year, we're sort of in late summer here, but over the last couple of months, I've witnessed, it seems small, but the hedgerows and the verges of our village being trimmed back. And it just seems so pointless and wanton, destruction of the environment. They were brimming with wildflowers just starting to come out, this huge potential ecosystem to support pollinators and then on to the insects, birds, the whole life cycle of our smaller fauna, and obviously the flora itself, which was what was destroyed. And the sound of the tractor, and the whir of the flail, the destruction afterwards, these beautiful native wildflowers that had so much promise and potential just reduced to a little chopped mess on the ground. It made my heart hurt. It was overwhelming for days, knowing what I know, that our ecosystem is struggling, our pollinators are struggling. We've just had the great butterfly count here in England, and there weren't the butterflies. Yes, we've had certain environmental factors this year. We had a very wet winter, very wet, quite cool spring, early summer, which will have definitely had an impact. But it's just been a very stark reminder this year of actually our native wildlife, from the tiniest insects all the way through, is struggling. Our birds, our garden birds, were feeding really heavily on our feeders in the spring when we would normally expect them to be sort of going out and utilizing more the natural food sources that are available to them, and we were propping them up. Actually, now as the harvest has started to take place here, we've seen actually the birds moving away from the feeders, which is fantastic and what it should be. But it was very evident earlier in the year that if we hadn't have been feeding them, they would have been struggling because there was a lack of their wild food available to them. And that's difficult for us to witness. And that's something that I've spoken about with several guests in the last year. And there's quite a lot of episodes, if you've missed any of them, that you can go back to. One of those episodes was with Leah Rampey, and she has a fantastic book, Earth and Soul, Reconnecting Amid Climate Chaos. And in that, we were discussing how do we carry on when we feel these moments of, well, sometimes not moments, they're quite protracted, this deep grief and heartache for what we're seeing happening in the world around us. And that can overflow as well into, it's become quite a popular term now, but eco-anxiety. But at its core as well, there's a trauma response. And I had a very good conversation with Meredith about how trauma can impact our ability to be activists, our ability to actually have an impact, and how we need to bring awareness to actually how seeing and witnessing what we are seeing and witnessing in the world around us, because it's not just the environment. There's a lot of trauma in the world at the moment, and those of us that connect to nature and care about nature, we are more deeply connected to everything around us. So we will feel this collective grief and despair that is really permeating the world at the moment. And we need to educate ourselves on how we can try and help our bodies, how we can understand the natural reflexes and responses that are innate in our body's wisdom of how we cope. But in a world where we are finding ourselves in like this hyper anxiety, we need to be more aware of what's triggering us and find a way to, those experiences it's normal and it's healthy. But the problem is when we become stuck in them. So it's a way to understand how to keep our emotions flowing, how to find equilibrium, how to feel the whole range of emotions without becoming overwhelmed, or at least not being stuck in that overwhelm for a prolonged period of time. And I think, over the last 20 episodes, there are quite a lot of conversations where with several of my guests where we've tried to bring you tools and just our own experiences and advice to let you know that you're not alone, to let you know that it is absolutely fine to feel like that, but to find your way through it. And that's what I want to help and support you to do. Because if we find our way through that anger, that hate, the frustration, if we can find our way back to love, then we have this incredible power. Because when you create from a place of love, it is infinitely more powerful. And that was something I loved exploring with Cynthia, was this power of intention. It's something that I have been passionate about for a while. I have obviously explored energy medicine, Reiki in particular, but flower essences, lots of the energy modalities. And the thing I love is, like, you might not know, but I actually have, when I was at years and years ago, very long time ago, I did science at school. I did chemistry up to A level. And so I do have like this scientist heart as well with in amongst all of this. And there is so much science out there to support this alternative view of how we can experience the world. And one of my favorite people who has really delved into the science of intention and collective intention and prayer is a lady called Lynn McTaggart. And I would highly recommend you, if you are interested in it, that you go and have a look at some of her stuff. But Cynthia also, her book is a great example of how them coming together as a collective with an intention centered around these earth treasure vases had these amazing ripple effects, and in ways that they couldn't have imagined. And I think that's something that really, in active hope and maintaining hope, is to remember to come back to your intention. And your intention should be one of creating something that you want to see, rather than destroying something that you don't want to see. It's a real subtlety, but it's something that just changes your whole approach to how you turn up in the world. And it can be about things that are more than just the environment. I've had some amazing conversations this year with people who are in business, and how business can be a force for positive change in our world, not just for the environment, but the importance of social enterprises and the need for social sustainability. I've had incredible conversations with Mara, who is a craft chocolatier. I am a secret chocoholic, so that was a fantastic conversation. And also Nicole, who is of Fern and Daisy and is a fashion designer. And we looked at how small businesses can reimagine a way of doing business that isn't exploitive, that is supportive of their customers, supportive of the environment, supportive of society, the people that work for them, every aspect of their business, from the raw materials through production to marketing to even what they do with the profits afterwards. I had an amazing conversation with Nick, who is doing a business on the side where he is roasting organic coffee and selling it to his local community and using the profits to support tree planting around the world. There are so many different ways that business can get involved, and they can just start shifting the needle. One of my favorite conversations on business was actually with Shaba Ali of Garden for Wildlife, which is part of the National Wildlife Federation in America. And this was such an inspiring conversation about how a charity that has this huge wealth of information and research over the environment can benefit from someone with a fantastic business background who just thinks differently, questions differently. He talked a lot about orthodoxies and about questioning why we do things. Sometimes the answer might be, yeah, that's great. The reason we do that is spot on and we should continue doing it. But sometimes it's actually, there might be a better way to do it. And that was what our conversation was. Although we were talking about how gardening can be this incredible tool to help the ecosystems and improve biodiversity, it was also a fantastic conversation about how business is not the enemy, how we need to use business, how we need to reimagine business and how it operates in our world. And we're going back to gardening. I've had a couple of fantastic conversations, Claire Ledbetter and Shaba, and we talked about how just doing simple things in your garden, a lot of us have some space. Even if you're in a flat, hopefully you have a window box, perhaps you have a community area, even if it's, getting in touch with your councils, and just encouraging us to maintain our garden spaces differently, to focus on our native plants. Yes, that's the weeds, There are wildflowers. So we need to embrace weeds. I got this fantastic feedback from a listener, and they were like, I need to understand how to embrace the weeds to learn what my native wildflowers are. The Garden for Wildlife have a fantastic resource for those in America. It's a little bit harder for some of the others, but there are amazing resources out there. Find your native plants, plant them, and they will support biodiversity in a way that goes beyond helping pollinators. It goes to helping the entire life cycle of insects, and then that filters up through the birds. Everything in our ecosystem benefits. So that's something really simple that all of us can do. And I love that. That's one of the things I'm really passionate about, is how can we make simple actions in our lives. So it can be about finding businesses that have this vision and supporting them, encouraging them. We all need encouragers in our life. And that might be your role. That might be as simple as it is. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. You just have to get out there and find the people that are already doing things differently, that are passionate, and you can just cheer them on, keep them going, keep them motivated, help them maintain their hope, reach out to them, say thank you to them. And if you can afford to buy their products, because sometimes they are a little bit more expensive, if you can afford to buy their products, then fantastic, buy them. But if you can't afford to buy them at this stage, then help them on social media, share their message, comment on their post. That makes a huge difference to small businesses, and it's something that is often overlooked by people who don't realize their own power. Going on from that, another facet of this idea of maintaining hope is educating ourselves. And I had a really fantastic conversation with Osprey Lake after reading her book, The Story Is in Our Bones. Osprey talks about worldviews with the understanding that we need to understand where we've come from. In my introduction to her episode, I said the famous quote by Einstein, which is, we can't solve problems with the same thinking that created them. I probably not quite got that quite right because I've done it off the top of my head. But we have to understand the thinking, the layers within our culture that are so ingrained that we do not see them. So that comes back to Shuba's idea of orthodoxies. Comes back to having this childlike curiosity that asks why. Why do we do that? Why have we always done that? And when we start to look at it, we understand how those worldviews have shaped the world that we've come to. And interestingly enough, we also understand that they haven't always been the worldviews of our culture. They also aren't the worldviews of every culture that is still in the world today. So there is scope for imagining and creating a different way of experiencing society and structuring society from the one that has become dominant in the Western world. Now, I've had to delve quite deep into this subject, and I found it really hard. It is a difficult subject. It's difficult to look at the exploitation of not just nature but people, because the two have gone hand in hand and they can't really be separated. A society that wants dominance over nature, that is happy to exploit nature, unfortunately is also one that is exploiting people, that has dominance over people, that has a hierarchy that says some people are better than others, which it shouldn't be. And we need to delve into these, and we need to question patriarchy, colonization, racism, capitalism. And we need to find ways to understand how we got to this point. And then we need to be prepared to ask the questions, perhaps not knowing the answers of how we can move forward. But there are some answers out there. Unfortunately, they're not being presented to us because the system doesn't want to collapse itself. So you have to look to the edges, look to the periphery. But the information is there. There are new ways, an integration of old ways, an understanding of indigenous wisdom that can lead us forward. So again, another part of my conversation with Osprey was about her work with indigenous people. And one of the things that they're moving forward is the legal framework for rights of nature, seeing nature as an ancestor, a being, giving a river rights to be free from pollution, to be considered in the conversation when planning pollution, anything that might impact that river is being decided by society. The river has its own representative or voice as a living being. And this is happening around the world. It's already taking place. So I think for me, again, that's a point of maintaining hope. People are already putting these things into practice. We just need to support them more. And they might not be perfect. We will refine them over time. But we need to start taking these steps. They are out there and we can support them. And running alongside all of this, I obviously also touch a lot on health and well-being. And this is something that I'm really passionate about, is about empowering people to advocate for their own health. We've moved into a society where it is dominated by certain aspects, pharmaceutical companies, agrochemical companies. They have become overwhelming in their influence of how we live our lives. And for me, something that I find really empowering is to help people take back autonomy over their own bodies and their health of them and their family. And whatever you want to call them, alternative or complementary therapies, offer us a doorway into that. Quite often they are working in a way that is in harmony with nature, in harmony with our bodies, and in honouring ourselves. And I've had some amazing conversations with some incredible people. I had a fantastic conversation with Eugenie, a homeopath in Australia. I love homeopathy. I have seen it at work with my horses, my animals, and myself for well over a decade. And there is so much science out there to support it. And we just have to open our minds to it. There's some amazing documentaries out there that explore the science behind homeopathy. And I would encourage you to go and look at that with an open mind, because homeopathy can be an incredible tool. It works for people. It is also being used now in farming situations. It works with plants. It works with animals. It can help us with challenges around resistance to certain, and things like antibiotic resistance. It's just an incredible modality that has been in existence for hundreds of years, was actually developed by a doctor and has been vilified because it doesn't fit a worldview and narrative that our society has developed. I also had amazing conversations about herbal and plant medicine. I loved my chat with Angie about Bowen therapy, about understanding the fascia in our body, about how we can help ourselves stay in equilibrium, that our bodies are this scrapbook, I guess, of what has happened in our lives, and that comes back to the trauma. There's some amazing books out there. One of my favorite books about trauma is called The Body Keeps the Score. And as we get older, all the things that have happened in our lives become trapped in our tissues. in our bodies. And I think as we get older, I'm now 40, we start to notice them because they've accumulated over our lives. And Bowen is a fantastic modality for working with, as Angie says, the issues in your tissues. So I unfortunately don't have a local Bowen therapist, otherwise I would be utilizing it more. But there are so many powerful modalities out there that can help support our health and the health of the planet and the health of nature. And it's exciting, it does feel overwhelming, but it's exciting too. We're on the cusp, or as Lee said, we're in the edge zone, the threshold. This is a time for bravery and for courage and coming together. And that's what this podcast community is, I hope. A place where we can come together, where we can share ideas, where we can listen to each other, where we can lift each other up. A rising tide lifts all boats. Together we can rise and we can create a world where nature is not exploited. A world where people aren't exploited. A world where people and nature are valued, not as commodities. So I called this episode Maintaining Hope. And I hope that's what you find with me in this community, is a place where we can, a melting pot basically of ideas, of things that we can all do, but there's no expectation that you do all of them. If your contribution is that you plant some wild native plants in your garden, that's fantastic. If your contribution is you think about your own health and well-being, that's fantastic. If your contribution is that you go out and you find a company or a business that is doing something better and you support them by buying their products, that's fantastic. If you feel called to do something more, if you feel called to raise your voice, then do it. But mostly just know that you're not alone. Come back here and I will do my best to keep finding people, keep finding ideas, keep learning, keep pulling at the threads as we try to unravel how we got here, and then we find a way to weave them together as we move forward and know that we can create a world that we're proud to leave to future generations, that we can be good ancestors for the generations to come. So thank you. Thank you for joining me in being a good ancestor. And I hope that you will continue on this journey with me. I would love to hear from you. I'd love you to share what episodes you found particularly inspiring. If you've got someone that you think would be fantastic, even if you would like to be on the podcast, reach out to me. I love hearing from you. This is a community. It's not about me. This is about the world, and it's about our future, and it's about a legacy for future generations of people, generations of plants, generations of animals. Together we can make a difference. One of my favorite stories was a little snippet that Osprey shared about a project that she's involved with in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And everyone knows my passion for Africa. And it's a women's organisation that has been growing and planting native trees as part of the Ntombe forest. Now, all the experts that they spoke to said that it would take 40 years for the forested areas that they were replanting to start sort of joining in the co-creation of the process. The forest would start regenerating itself alongside the trees that they were planting. And they're 9 years in, and the forest has started to join in regenerating itself. We have ideas about timescales and how long things can take, but we're in co-creation with nature, and nature has its own timescales. And if we help it, if we honour it, if we enter into relationship with it, miracles can happen. So in under a decade, this tropical forest, which is part of one of the biggest forests in the world after the Amazon, is regenerating itself alongside these women who are caring for it, realising its importance in the world. And, that gives me hope. So with that story, I leave you that seed of hope that change is possible and we can make a difference. Thank you so much for listening to the Nurtured by Nature podcast. I truly hope this conversation has brought some hope and inspiration into your life. I would love to have these messages ripple out across the world. So if you can, please share this episode with your friends, leave a review on your favourite podcast player, and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. I would love to hear from you, so please feel free to connect with me on the links provided in the podcast description. But most importantly, thank you so much for being a part of this journey with me. But don't forget to simply get out there and enjoy the natural world.